Thank you, everybody, for watching so far. Hope you're really enjoying the content. I loved that last session on building just raving fans inside business. And so we're going to move into probably my favorite topic of the day, which is process and operations. And I might be biased as a process freak, but I'm super excited for this one. Now, it's called the art of systemization and tweaking processes. And I know some of you listening are thinking, oh, processes, this isn't the fun thing in business. But for a lot of small businesses, this is what stands in the way of scaling. And it's a huge piece of what could be missing in your business. And so if you want to be able to respond to change, to increase your efficiency and to stay competitive as you're growing, then definitely take notes in this session. It's why we started Trainual. And so we're going to dig in. We're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk about business model changes, about how to stay consistent with your processes, your roles, your responsibilities, managing change, automation, all of that stuff. And we'll see where the conversation takes us. So today we've got three amazing panelists participating. First, we've got Cameron Herold, founder of COO Alliance and former COO of 1-800-GOT-JUNK, along with the author of some of my favorite books. What's up, Cameron?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Next, we've got Josh MacIntyre. Josh is head of revenue operations over at Grammarly. And without him, everything I'm reading off of would be spelled incorrectly. So what's up, Josh?
Thanks for the plug there. Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I love your software.
Awesome.
I think everyone does. And then we've also got Margaret Kim, director of strategy and operations at an investing platform for women called Ellevest. Hey, Margaret.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. All right. So if you couldn't tell in my intro, I'm excited to talk process. And so we did our best to pull questions that would be appropriate for each of you. But if you've got something to add, just dive in because we want to hear from whatever you've got to say. So if there was ever a time to be flexible with process and operations and have to be understanding as things are evolving, I guess it would be 2020. So I want to hear quickly from each of you, just kind of what you had to grapple with this year. So let's go back. February, March comes around, COVID hits. You're either scrambling to expand operations or contract operations. How do you wrap your head around the job that needs to be done? Why don't we go first to Cameron?
Sure. Well, we actually had to do both. So we were going through some very rapid growth and some really good transition with the COO Alliance back in January, February, March, had three of our biggest months in a row. We're growing quite fast, quite successfully. All of our members were really, really happy, like an 86% net promoter score. And then we hit a brick wall because our entire model was running live events for second in commands from all over the world. And they would come into 3 events a year in either Scottsdale or Vancouver. Can't really do that live event thing. So we tried bringing our model online and it worked okay. But when your net promoter score drops from 86 to 40, I started paying attention a little bit, thinking that we can't really force people into doing 2.5-day events online. We really had to change things. And I'm also a bit of an entrepreneurial COO. I've always been on the entrepreneurial side of operations. So I just went and asked my clients. I asked all of our members. I went and talked to 5 of our current members and 5 of the founding members of the COO Alliance. And I asked them what they would create if they had to create a brand new model in today's landscape. And they actually gave me all of the core parts of what we now call the COO Alliance 2.0. We relaunched in September, and now our growth is probably double or triple even what it was back in January, February, and March. So we've been adding clients now from Africa and Europe and from Australia. So really, really interesting model, and just was working. So it was just about being adaptable, but really listening to my clients.
Wow, such a good point. If you just ask your customers, what would you still buy now? Or what do you want now that's different? Then we can all adapt. How about you, Margaret? What's this year been like?
So we were actually about to launch a new money membership right before COVID. And so we were essentially shifting our entire business model. You introduced Ellevest as an investing platform for women. We are now a full money suite, including investing, banking, career, and coaching services.
Wow.
So of course, as the country went into lockdown back in March, we saw that the pandemic was disproportionately impacting women. And of course, it was a scary time to be totally changing your business model. So we took the time to pause and evaluate what our community needed and looked at our mission, which has always been to get more money into the hands of more women, and realized that, is more important now really than ever. You might have heard the term she session, how this pandemic really impacts women. So we decided to double down on what we were doing, but not just double down in the same direction. We made some pivots where, we're about to launch some paid coaching and learning sessions. Instead, we offer them to the community, to the public for free. And we changed the topics to be more timely. So things like how to budget during a recession, what to do if you lost your job, how to network remotely. And so just really, thinking about what we can do to support women and our community during this really interesting and turbulent time. And it ended up being that moving to this new model really made sense during this time and during this challenging, questionable time for everyone.
Yeah, and so you mentioned launching this new subscription service. Was it about, pre-COVID, was it about revenue channel diversification, or what was that the plan?
Yeah, so our pivot was really hand in hand with offering more products. So taking it from just an investing platform that was traditionally assets under management base to now offering banking, learning, career services, et cetera. So tons of different offerings. So the subscription model allows us to really be more transparent and clear about the pricing we offer. So it starts from $1 and goes all the way up to $9 a month. And so the other part of that, what drove that product change was the idea that so many folks loved our mission. They would literally write to us saying that they want to be clients, but some of them couldn't because they're in an industry where they can't sign up with another investment account. But a lot of them just weren't ready to invest or didn't feel like they were ready to invest. So by offering this whole suite, we help women get to a place where she can start investing often sooner than she thought she could.
And it's so smart because when there's uncertainty, I think information is one of the most important things. And so people were probably gravitating toward that new service as soon as you launched it.
Yeah.
Josh, how about you? What's this year been like for Grammarly?
Yeah, I don't think we're unique in that it's been an interesting one, right? There's a lot of change this year, and especially when the pandemic hit, first and foremost was how does it affect our people and our team members, right? We want to make sure that we can continue to make sure that everyone feels safe, as well as employed, obviously, and then make sure that we can provide for our users. So once we had that all sorted and kind of handled the shift to remote, the focus was really about how we can support our users, since people do actually rely on Grammarly more now in this type of remote environment where asynchronous communication and writing in general is so prevalent, right? There's so many businesses that did everything in person now are just forced to write things down and communicate over email, Slack, you name it. And so with that, we had to invest really heavily in growing our team to support that and the increased usage, as well as investing in our product to make sure that the value that we have stays, but we continue to add on that based on the needs of people moving online now. And then lastly, and a big part of it as well, and kind of ties back to the people in our team, we want to make sure that we invested in our local communities to make sure that we could help wherever possible. So part of that was we offered our team-based product to all nonprofits around the world free of charge for the whole year. So we've had thousands of institutions come on board with that. And then lastly, making financial donations wherever possible in Canada, US, and Ukraine, where we have our offices.
That's awesome. I saw somewhere that Grammarly just passed, is it 30 million active users? Am I getting that number right?
Yeah, 30 million daily active users.
Crazy. And last year was like 10 million or something. So you guys have just blown up. Now, can you walk through the business model? Because I think a lot of people have probably used Grammarly or tried it as a free plugin. How do you monetize something when it starts off as free like that?
Yeah, great question. So little known fact about Grammarly that most people aren't aware of is that we were actually a paid product when we started 11 years ago. It was mainly around the ed tech market, and then kind of grew out into folks buying it themselves. And we made the conscious choice in 2014 to actually flip that paid model that we had been running, that had been profitable and we were doing well with, and go with the freemium approach, which at the time was a little radical, right? It's like, why would you take something that's working and just fundamentally change it? And so moving to freemium, the main reason why for us, and I'm sure it applies for many others, is just the reach that you can have. And that reach is really a dual-sided benefit in that the more folks you can offer your product to, the more you can learn from them, which means the more you can improve the product, which then improves the value for those users. So it creates this kind of virtuous value loop that allows us to continually improve on our product, which makes it better for our existing users and more likely to tell others to use it. And it just keeps getting better and better over time like that.
And I guess that assumes that the free user is the right target customer to be a paid customer, whereas some companies might try to give something away for free that their target customer would never buy, right? So you've got to have that pretty dialed in.
Yeah, for sure. In the early days, I wasn't at Grammarly back in 2014 when we made that initial split, but I'm aware of how we're doing it now. And basically, like understanding what are the table stakes that everyone is going to need and want in the product in the free version is super important. We really took our time with that. It took years even to divvy that out. And then that changes over time too, right? As the market changes, industry expectations, what people want in a product. And then as well, I would say that, yes, it's important to look at your freemium user base as folks that you can monetize, but it doesn't mean that those that don't provide value, to my point earlier, right? Like usage in the product is huge. It helps you understand what's working, what isn't, what maybe should be monetized that isn't, what maybe something that is monetized that shouldn't be, and really provides that test ground. So if you look at us with the 30 million users that we have now on a daily basis, we can have hypotheses and test them across a percentage of our entire user base, and that's 300,000 folks. That's very statistically significant, as opposed to, let's say, my previous company where you have hundreds of users, and to get anything that you can really glean insight from that isn't like really anecdotal is pretty tough. So there's that advantage side to it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So Cameron, Margaret, I'm curious, have either of you ever tried free or a try before you buy scenario? Because I think it's something a lot of us are thinking about. We've thought about it with Trainual. There is this increased interest in testing things, trying things. How have you thought about this?
Margaret, you want to go?
Yeah. So we definitely offer a lot of parts of our platform for free. So there's a lot of content. We have 3 newsletters that go out a week, and that is all free, as well as certain webinars, as I mentioned. We also, previously, when we were just offering the investing platform, you could actually go online and put in your information and get a free financial plan or investment plan. It's really just when you actually move your money over and we start to manage it that we started to charge on that. So, there's definitely this huge community, and we're very big on social as well, where we start to learn from them, get feedback from them, understand what they are looking for.
Yeah, it's a great R&D thing, if nothing else, right? You're learning so much. How about you, Cameron?
Yeah, we definitely used not quite a freemium model, but we do what we call our test drive. So we allowed people to pay to come to one event instead of buying in for the whole year. And if they liked the one event, then they could join for the year. But what we did instead of a freemium model was we gave them a 10x guarantee. And we said that if they didn't get at least 10 times their investment by coming to one of the CO Alliance events, we'd give them their money back. And then now I just extended it to the entire year. So now I've said, join us for the whole year. Come to the 3-hour monthly events for the entire year, be a part of the Slack channel for the entire year, be a part of my membership for the entire year. If at the end of the year, you haven't generated at least 10x your return, I'll give you your money back, even though you've been there for the full year. And we've been doing it now for 4 years. No one's taken us up on it, but it's really given people the confidence that they'll get their money's worth. And then we're just trying to prove to them at every event that you're not only getting it for the year, but we're going to give you 10x your value at each event. So really, you're going to get 100x return on your investment.
Wow. That's a powerful guarantee.
Well, it doesn't cost me anything, right? Because it's a pure gross margin business. It's not like I'm selling furniture that I have to return if they don't like the furniture, right? It's purely a service play. So if I really believe in the product, then I'll give you, and the reality is if they're not enjoying it, I don't really want them as a member anyway.
Right. Right. When I was doing solo consulting and it was just me, I would reach out to prospects and offer them $500 if our coffee meeting didn't give them a ton of value. And so it was the same thing. It was like, well, he's going to pay me $500 to go grab coffee, and they got to decide at the end of the meeting, and no one ever made me pay them. So
I had someone the other day offer to buy me coffee for my time. And I said, dude, my hourly rate is so much higher than a cup of coffee. I'll just do a call with you. But we're good on the coffee.
Right. Okay, so Cameron, COO Alliance, at least version 1.0 is a membership model. I assume it's still some form of buy-in for the year, or buy-in by month, right?
It is, yeah. It's $7,500 a year, and they get the entire membership for the year.
Got it. Okay, so a lot of businesses that are listening, they could be product, they could be service, but there could be a membership component to their business that they haven't yet explored. In the businesses that you consult in your group, have you seen any of them add membership revenue to part of the mix?
Trying to think. I'm a part of an amazing community called Trends right now on Facebook. That's a membership community that's done quite well. One thing that I've noticed on some membership stuff is instead of charging the monthly fee, they'll have a yearly fee, but collect 50% of that up front. So they kind of front load the membership, and then the monthly amount is much lower. And it almost gets you to be fully pot committed for the period. But that's all I'd have to add on that one.
Yeah, it's interesting that, operations in many ways is about figuring out how to get creative and make it work, right? And so whether it's front loading cash or making guarantees, it's a lot of baked into how we execute this.
Well, it's how you remove the friction for the buyer as well. I was in Park City this summer, and I was standing at the top of the Olympic jump and looking straight down. I'm like, it's so efficient to go from the top of the hill to the bottom. And then I went over and went on the Olympic bobsled run, and I was getting bashed in every corner. And you're still going from the top to the bottom, but at every turn it hurt. And I was thinking about our businesses and why do we create so much friction for people to join? And that's kind of where that 10x guarantee just really stood out as well, right?
I like it. Okay, so Cameron, I know you mentioned being up in Vancouver. I don't know if you're in Vancouver or Arizona right now. Josh.
I'm in Arizona today.
Okay, so you're here today. Josh, you were responsible for opening Grammarly's Vancouver office, right? How do you as a brand decide to open a satellite office? And what would be the reasons why someone may have multiple locations? Is it efficiency of the workforce, the labor there? Is it dividing departments of the business? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, great question. So for us, the two main reasons why we wanted to open the office in Vancouver is one, access to great talent. Vancouver is a pretty undervalued talent market in the tech space. It's something that we're very familiar with. I grew up in Canada, lived here my whole life, just moved down to San Francisco to work for Grammarly back in 2017. So I was pretty familiar with it myself. We also had two of our co-founders that were living there. So Alex Shevchenko and Max Litvin. So they're already there and they were commuting back and forth. And so they knew the market as well. And once we saw the talent that was there, and we decided that it was somewhere to move, it also just made sense from efficiency and convenience perspective. It's the same time zone as San Francisco. It's a short flight. It's 2 hours each way. You can really do a day trip if you need. So it makes it really easy for you to open another office and not have it be a quote unquote like satellite office like you hear, where it's just opened up because you have a particularly small opportunity. It actually allows us to basically have an integrated team in two places between San Francisco and Vancouver, where there's a ton of overlap between the teams. And it allows us to really grow the team here and not have to worry about culture not translating over or folks kind of not being able to work together. Obviously, it's different now with COVID and everybody being remote. We're all in the same boat. But initially, it made it really simple to onboard folks, have them go down to San Francisco, and allowed us to grow our team. We've grown from just the three of us, Max, Alex, and myself, a year ago to almost 30 folks now. So it's been a great success, and we love it up here.
Nice.
Wow, congratulations.
You guys are part of the Maple Syrup Mafia.
Doing our best, Cameron. We're trying.
30 people and 30 million users. I think that's a ratio that a lot of us would just dream about. So congratulations on that. Margaret, I know before Ellevest, you were at Goldman Sachs, and before that, you helped a bunch of other startups. I'm curious, it's a kind of a two-part question. One, how do the systems and processes, the operations differ between really big companies and really small companies? I'll ask that one first.
Sure. So, surprisingly, if I'm comparing Ellevest and Goldman Sachs, I don't think there's much of a difference because we're both super highly regulated entities. The difference is really the size of the teams and the amount of teams that you're working with. But I would also say, as a function of my role, even at Goldman, was always on the side of creating new process rather than following existing processes and improving them. But yeah, I would say one of the biggest differences between being at Goldman and being in the startup space is really the amount of technology that we're using and all the different tools that we have. When I was at Goldman, everything was proprietary. But that might also be a function of time and Slack not being around at that time. And so it's hard to kind of separate that for me.
Sure. And it was funny. We had Dawn from Slack on 2 sessions ago, and it's like every business in the world is now a customer of theirs. It's been a cool ride for them. So I guess my second question is, you've worked with a lot of startups. If you were consulting or diving in to take over operations for one of the hundreds or thousands of companies that's listening, where do you start? how do you get up to speed on their operations, or how do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would start with a goal. What are they trying to achieve? And then from there, outline what are the biggest risks, what are the biggest obstacles to achieving that goal, and start documenting and operationalizing those. So for example, let's say your goal is to reduce churn and one of your risks is slow customer support. Well, then I would start with really understanding how your team triages tickets, how they support them, how they identify different trends, and then bubble them up to teams like product or marketing to reduce tickets to improve the customer experience. So yeah, I would definitely kind of start high with what you're trying to achieve and then trickle down from there.
Got it. So it always starts with the goal and what the business is trying to achieve. And then you look at the problems of why they haven't achieved that. And then you put a plan in place. Very
Right.
block and tackle. Cameron, I want to go back into the 1-800-GOT-JUNK days, because you were there from when there was, what, a dozen employees?
Yeah, I was
until 3,000?
I was the 14th employee. And when I left 6.5 years later, we had 3,100 employees system-wide. So, and I was the COO through that.
That's amazing. So that was a franchise model. And I'm curious, with a franchise, everything is about process.
Yeah.
And, how do you make sure that the processes you put in place at the franchisor level are followed all the way down by each individual operator?
We did a few things. Well, it was the third franchise company that I'd helped build as well. So I really understood how to actually scale really rapidly growing franchise organizations. The first one was we wanted to turn our company into a cult so that it was a little bit more than a business, a little bit less than a religion. We wanted to be that strong culture. And the more that it was cult-like, people would follow the systems. Second one was really, really thinking about the profitability of our franchisees and obsessing about their profitability and showing them how every system was going to make them more profitable. And when they realized that we cared and obsessed about them, they would do it, because it wasn't about driving revenue. But sure enough, because they followed the systems, it drove revenue. And then the third thing that we did was we really tried to kind of idiot-proof the system. So we looked at a franchisee that we had in a market that really wasn't very good. They had a ton of snow in the middle of winter. He was one of our earliest franchisees. And we used to say that if we could Bob-proof the system so that Bob could do it in Buffalo in the middle of a Buffalo winter, if he could execute the system and be successful, anybody could. So it was, how do we really simplify the systems just to create? And that was across, whether it was recruiting or hiring or training or operations or marketing, whatever. It was simple systems.
So Josh, I'm curious your perspective, going from 3 people last year to 30 people this year. You are in the thick of it. And a lot of that period of growth for businesses is about creating process for the first time. Small companies tend to be resistant to any sort of process because you're figuring it out as you go. So what's changed, I guess, in the last 12 months? Have you formalized much of how you do things?
Yeah, definitely. And just to provide context, so Vancouver's gone from 3 to 30, but Grammarly itself is about 450 globally.
Okay,
but
got it.
When I started 3 years ago, we were about 80, 90 folks, and now we're 450. So that growth has been massive. And to your point in your question, we have seen a ton of that kind of foundational building. And it's really hard when you're moving really fast and understandably focusing on how to run your business and kind of get the job done to want to take the time back and actually document things. But for me, it's really about a mindset shift, right? It's not about whether or not you need to. You obviously need to, but you need to look at it as an investment as opposed to a chore, which is what most people do. They go, I don't want to write this down. I know how to do it. And such beside me knows how to, and beside them knows how to. And then all of a sudden, if you have 10 more people, how can you guarantee that you're not playing a game of telephone with the processes that are ultimately going to affect your business and your success? And so having that mindset shift, and back to what Cameron mentioned earlier, it's like you do have to have buy-in on that. Like you need to set that expectation from day one. And that starts with onboarding, which is a great place to start documenting, right? Is how do you onboard? What do the frameworks look like for that? The nuts and bolts that make up your processes can change over time, but the overall framework should remain pretty consistent until you reach a certain scale where it requires you to blow it up again. And at least then you're building from a base. So I think that mindset shift was massive for us. We all kind of had that from the beginning. And I think COVID for a lot of businesses has forced that, whether or not they wanted to. You have to have things written down. You have to know how things work. And secondly, to kind of back up that mindset shift is also when you think about any time you want to change something or start something new, the first question most people ask is, how do we currently do this? Like, what are we changing? Like, what is, so that you can then know where you want to take it and what needs to differ between the two. And if you don't have that documented, you're going to be doing it anyway. So it's just inefficient to not try and do that up front.
Yeah. And of course, I'm a huge fan of documenting and writing things down. So +1 to that. I'm curious in the chat, I would love to hear who's played the game of telephone and things have gotten incorrect in the business. So if you've had the telephone problem in your business, just say yes, 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 yes. We're going to watch this chat fill up with yeses. Yes, 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 yes. Here they come. I think everybody can identify with that. So small companies, a lot of times don't invest in process or really just whiteboarding out their operations, because it kind of feels like, the car is moving so fast, we can't take a pit stop. You can't move on things as it's going. So open question to any of you: how do you make the time to actually fix what's broken in the business?
So I first started try to focus always around sales and marketing opportunities first. I've always believed that there's not a single problem that exists that a check can't solve. So I'm always kind of pushing growth. And then while we grow, the faster we grow, it usually shakes the business a little bit and it shows you what's broken and it shows you what can be fixed. So it's more of an entrepreneurial hyper growth approach. It's how we grew 6 consecutive years of 100% revenue growth without giving up any equity, was drive for growth. And then as you grow, fix it later. So I'm more of a growth-minded operations person than I am a fix the systems first.
Yeah. How about you, Margaret?
Yeah, I think that's definitely important. And at the rate we're growing, we always hear the phrase, what is it? Building the plane as you fly, or something along those lines. So that's definitely true for us. But I think for us, processes so important because the cost of rework is just really expensive when we're trying to move this quickly, and we're moving with a lean team. We have a super strong innovation and culture testing where we're always testing everything that we do. And so without strong processes, we're not going to be able to measure our performance to see if we're actually growing, to see if the tests we're conducting are successful. And then 2, to be able to actually react and execute on that test. So, I would say it is sometimes I have to evangelize process and operations to teams because we do want to move quickly. We want to get new products out the door. But I think we've had enough case studies where we could see how not having process has really hurt or made people kind of burn the candles at both ends. So I think, it's kind of getting that buy-in and showing the value to the rest of the team that, hey, we can actually move faster if we slow down, put process in place, document this, and then, just really set ourselves up to be on fire.
Yeah, I love what you said, was it making experimentation or culture of testing? That's what you said, right? Yeah. And testing is a way to do kind of like a minimum viable product of implementing some operations, so if you can't afford for the whole business to stop, you put little tests in place. And then if you prove the test and you see the ROI, then it makes sense to stop. So I love that tip. Josh, I know that operations and hiring go hand in hand oftentimes, and you actually ran recruiting during a leadership transition. So how should growing businesses that are listening plan for who they need to hire and when?
Yeah, great question. It really ties back to the North Star metrics of what you need to achieve as a business, right? What is it for different parts of your company? There's top line growth, like Cameron mentioned. Is it culture related? Is it product related? You name it. Like that's really important for you to define early on. And then to your point, you can test over time to see how it positively or negatively affects that North Star metric. When it comes to hiring in general, it's really important to actually have a process from day one. Especially when you're small, because if you don't, 1 hire out of 5 people is 20% of your productivity, right? So if you get it wrong, the cost is massive to your business. And I think ironically for a lot of folks around hiring and people and HR functions in a traditional sense, it's actually the last place that most folks invest in their business, like statistically speaking. It's the last headcount to get staffed out. So even if you can't afford to say bring on full-time folks, you need to invest in that process from day one because the cost is so high. and it's not known until after the decision is made for months. So it's a long tail indicator of your success or not. So there's a ton of resources out there. Like it's not rocket science. You can find anything you need to for how to set up your hiring process. And then what you need to hire is really dependent on your individual business and what you need to achieve, which again should tie back to what's the North Star for your company. What are you trying to get to? What's the value you're trying to perceive?
Yeah, great point. And I agree. People invest far too late in perfecting their hiring process. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, I think it was, says that if a new hire doesn't work out, it's a 30% of their salary, their annual salary is the cost of what it takes just operationally to like restart that process and get someone new up to speed. So it's a massive cost if we don't pay attention to it. Of course, Trainio has some great templates on how to do your hiring process. Okay, so Margaret, Ellevest, I know, has seen a good amount of growth over the last few years. You're over 100 employees now, right?
Just about. I don't know the exact number, but
okay, so you're right around kind of the target growth of people watching. How do roles and responsibilities change as you scale over that journey the last few years, and how often do you revisit them?
Yeah, I would say we're constantly revisiting them. So just for some context, Ellevest had our first public launch MVP November 2016, and I joined early the next year. At that time, we had just one investing product with a brokerage account. We've now expanded our investing product out. I talked about the money membership. We have a whole traditional private wealth business as well. And with all of these changes across the platforms, we grew our client base by almost 40 times, but we only grew our employee headcount by less than 4 times. So I think we had about 20 people or so when I joined. And so, of course, a lot of that was intentional. It was really working hard to scale, put processes in place, put automations in place so that we didn't have to hire a new headcount for every X amount of clients that we brought on. And so it's interesting because there's, I would say, an ebb and flow to the roles and responsibilities. Someone might start out as being, this multi-hat wearing person who does a little bit of everything for the team. And as that team matures, expands, I talked about having more investing products, then they actually became more specialized. And they go deeper into one specific function. And so I don't think there, at least for us, is one answer of how roles shift. It's just constantly reevaluating what direction the business is going in, what we need, what might have taken like 3 headcounts in the past because of automations and technology maybe takes half of someone's day. And so, we're just always thinking through, just as we do with our actual systems and processes, looking at all of our resources, including our talent, and seeing, how they are best leveraged across the firm.
Yeah, Cameron, I see you pumping your fist about automation.
It's what Margaret said about that the real reason for doing automation and for systemizing anything is to really become more optimized and reduce the amount of headcount that you need. And years ago, I was coaching a company in New York, and they told me one of their stated goals was to go from 100 to 180 employees. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, why do you have a goal to grow the employees? That doesn't make any sense. Your number one goal in your company should be your employee net promoter score. And then you have to drive towards customer net promoter score. And then your profitability and revenue can flow off those. But you need to get higher revenue per employee as you scale and higher gross margin per employee as you scale, or you're becoming less and less efficient. So what I've noticed is the 1s and the 3s. I don't know if anybody's heard of this number before, but companies really change at each of the 1 and 3 hurdle points. When you're 1 employee and you go to 3, from 3 to 10, from 10 to 30, 30 to 100, 100 to 300, there's very distinct changes in the company's organization. And even at the revenue levels, if you go from 100,000 to 300,000 to 1 million to 3 million to 10 million to 30 to 100, the way the company scales. And I think it's important to look for kind of leading indicators to know that you're going to need to work through some of those systems. The other part is that most middle level managers can only handle 2 layers of growth, 2 doubles in the size of the company before they're out of a job, unless they really continue to scale their skills up. But a manager, let's say that you're the director of marketing with a 50-person company. When you go to 100 people, you're now stretching yourself. When you're at 200, you're probably no longer the highest ranking marketing person in the company unless you've really worked on those marketing skills, right? So Ben Horowitz from Hard Thing About Hard Things talks about 1 triple. Clayton Mask and I from Infusionsoft talked about the 2 doubles tends to be the number, but they're about the same.
Yeah. And Clayton's on our board, so I've heard that speech over and over again. He's a great guy.
Amazing.
I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious how working with so many COOs, Cameron, how do they handle rolling out change across the business? You know, hopefully they're getting more efficient. Actually, let me back up. I want to echo what you're saying, because we started measuring revenue per full-time employee, and it's been an incredible metric for efficiency. So anybody that's watching this should absolutely do that. And the goal shouldn't be, let's just linearly add people and never get more efficient. But as you add people, hopefully the multiple of what you can do is similar to what Margaret said, 4 times the people, 40 times the customers. I think that's what we're shooting for. Cameron, back to the question about your COOs. So much is changing all the time. How do you keep your people up to speed with the changes and enroll them, get them excited about change in a business?
I really try to get them to rally around this concept called the vivid vision that we created about 10 or 12 years ago that we've rolled out globally. And it becomes a 4 or 5 page document that describes the company in its finished state 3 years in the future, right? So it's like a full description of what your company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years in the future, which then provides a filter for all the employees to start making decisions, and they're all in complete alignment. They know where they're going. So they understand the value in their work. They understand why they're doing what they're doing. They understand how it ties in with the BHAG and your core purpose and your core values. They understand everything in the business. So that's the first part. I think the second one is just to really remember that our role as leaders isn't to tell people what's to do, it's to support them. So if the CEO and COO are below the VPs who are supporting the managers, who are supporting the customers, or supporting the frontline employees, supporting the customers, our role is to keep giving them the systems to help them be more efficient, to help remove obstacles, to help them be able to do better. So it's less about telling them to do stuff, and it's more about selling them on doing it, right? Sell them, don't tell them.
Yeah, love that. Margaret, Josh, any other thoughts on change, rolling out change and getting everyone on board?
I love that you said you were, what did you say, like a process freak?
Yeah.
Something along those lines. And I definitely relate to that. I geek out at new technology, at the idea of putting processes in place, automating. And I kind of was raised that way. When I was at Goldman as an operations analyst, I was taught that the best operations folks are the laziest, because they spend all their time just trying to figure out how to not do that work, right? How to automate boring and repetitive tasks. Yeah. But one thing I will say, in a startup, in a small company, I really had to rein myself in and learn to put some discipline around that, because when you're constantly developing and reiterating on process, it's important to make sure that you're not over engineering the systems and automating processes before you know what those really are or should be. Otherwise, you're just creating more headaches, more work for yourself than you're actually saving. So we were talking before about having MVP as a product. Same thing with process and same thing with operations. It's really kind of doing a little by little. And I usually will launch things where it's totally manual. And then I'll start to put in validations, automations, start to put more like guided rules around processes.
Yeah, makes sense. There was actually a good question about process. I think, Cameron, you just answered this by text, but I'm going to ask it because I think it'd be great for everyone to hear. What's the best way to document process? Do you document just the 20% high level steps, or do you show the entire how-to? So I'm curious what you all think on this.
Yeah, so I guess my starting point is I'm the dumb guy, right? So I was never the smart kid in school. I really was struggling with university. I struggled in school. So I always looked to simplify the systems, because for me, if I could simplify it, then it could scale. So I've always believed that if you can't actually document a system on a Post-it note, you're probably not thinking clearly and simply enough. So I start with literally trying to document it on a Post-it note. And then I go from Post-it note to a Google Sheet or a Google Doc, and we work through the system, and we use the system, and we try the system, and then we bring it into a Trainual or a Process Street or like some software afterwards. And it's the same with metrics and dashboards. Like some people are like, oh, what dashboard should I use? I'm like, God, you don't even know what metrics to measure or what you're going to do with them, let alone putting it into some stupid software.
Yeah.
So I think people have to go back to the basics of just really, really keep it simple and then leveraging technology to make it scale.
Yeah, spot on. I would tell people that, you say systems and processes, and I think it's processes and systems. Like the process comes before the system. If the system's the technology you're putting in place, you've got to know what you want to do with it. You don't want to just buy tech and figure out, what am I using this to its capacity.
I think back to College Pro Painters, where I really cut my teeth and learned how to grow companies back in the 80s and 90s. In fact, I hired Kimball Musk to work for me in 1993 at College Pro. But we had to hire 8,800 employees in 4 months every year. There's not a lot of companies on the planet that hire 8,800 people, but our hiring system was a piece of paper. It was on one page. The entire interview guide, so on how to do the job interview, was on one page, but it was so bulletproof because it had to be, right? But we had to simplify it. Otherwise, if we gave people a 16-page interview guide to hire people, they weren't going to use it. But one page people could wrap their head around. Now, was it perfect? No, but it scaled.
Right. Yeah. My final answer to how much to document would be, I think you only document the things that you're trying to delegate. So if you're still trying to figure out how to do something and it's not fully baked, I wouldn't spend much time documenting it. If it's something that you've got a ton of people doing and you want to make sure they do it consistently, you put more detail into that sort of thing. So I think it depends on where the business is. All right, next question for all. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to offer a slightly different perspective, I guess, again, because of the industry we're in, we're actually required to document everything. And not only it's not just documented and put into a black hole, we're actually audited on an almost yearly basis where the SEC actually looks at our processes, compares it to what we're doing. So in that case, my kind of rule of thumb and my approach is I don't want the expert creating the process. I don't want them documenting things. I actually love to use it as a training method so that new hires or people who are learning a new process are the ones documenting, because they have a fresh perspective on what makes sense, what doesn't work. When you kind of know the process in and out and you're doing it all the time, it's easy to miss steps or just kind of make assumptions that people know what you have to do. So if you're in a place where you do need detailed documentation, I always kind of will put myself in that. If you've never done this process before, can you follow these steps type of mindset?
Yeah, great suggestion. So have your interns, have your new hires do your documentation if you're listening to this. All right. I think one more question from the group here. This was, it says, during startup, did any of these organizations have issues with bringing on talent before your budget could afford it? Any ideas for people that feel they need extra help and can't yet afford those hires?
Yeah, if I can, from the tech side of things, it's like that's what equity's for, right? That's how you afford it. So you can maybe go lower on the salary side, but provide people with more ownership in the business. And the people that you hired at the beginning are probably not going to be the folks that are running it when you're 1,000 people, to Cameron's point earlier. But with that, they need to have a certain level of buy-in that's very different than that person you do hire at the 1,000 point, right? There's a lot more sweat equity here gets thrown around where they're going to be doing a lot more. Whatever you hire them for, they're going to be doing 5 other things. So you need to make sure that you compensate accordingly in the upside in order to kind of offset that.
And one of my tips is that if you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. And if your role that you're in is paying you more than an EA is worth, you should be delegating everything off your plate that's less than your effective hourly rate. So even if you're in a startup phase and you've got 6 people that are all making or hoping to be able to make more, you can really offload a lot of your busy work onto fractional or virtual EAs, which really frees up your time to actually work on the business instead of in the business. And I think so many people work harder and harder and harder instead of working smarter.
Agreed. So if you're listening to this and you need some extra help while you're scaling up, consider a VA, consider an EA, consider a part-time contractor, a full-time contractor, a part-time employee, wherever you are. Give equity if you can't afford them, but you need help. You need to take some roles off your plate so that the group can, the business can move forward. Cameron, Josh, Margaret, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being a part of this and lending your expertise today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, guys.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching another awesome session. We're going to be moving on next in 5 minutes to getting the most bang for your marketing bucks.